going to be presenting the CSols webinar for this month. I'm a mathematician by education, but I've been working in the lab informatics space, although it's only recently been called that, for the last, since the first days of LIMS, so for a long, long time. And obviously during that time I have seen and experienced a lot, as has the whole company. Over the last decade or so, CSols has worked on many lab informatics implementations. And the success of these implementations, especially when it comes to realizing business benefits, has varied widely. So what I want to be able to do today is pass on some learnings that we have picked up as we've been going through these different implementations, such that you can develop deployment strategies that will realize true business benefits. So the overall premise of this webinar is that you've already developed a strategic plan and that you've selected your lab informatics solutions. So the first part of this agenda or this webinar will be to review just what we mean by that in the story so far. We'll then go into some techniques, implementation techniques for defining the change that you're about to make in a way that minimizes risks and focuses on successful deployment. We'll follow that up with some techniques for managing the change that you're about to undertake, and techniques that will maximize the potential for complete adoption of the pending change and the realization of business benefits. We'll then wrap it all up, a quick recap, and then we'll throw the whole session open to questions and answers. So the story so far. So the assumption here is that you've already developed a strategy for your lab informatics solution. And what does that really mean? Well, it means different things to different people. So I'm just going to try and set the playing field here. Our expectation is that you've developed a vision for your lab that you have been articulating throughout your organization, and it's a vision that's aligned with your overall corporate strategy and objectives. You've also, hopefully this is, performed a detailed workflow analysis or process mapping of your current operations, such that you have a documented, well-documented view of the current state. Our expectation is that you've then taken your knowledge of the lab informatics solutions that are out there, and from your current state have defined a desired future state. And based upon that desired future state, you have defined the business benefits that you expect to realize by implementing that future state. We also expect that you will have created a URS at some level or another, minimally a high-level URS, and typically at this stage of the game, in your dealings with the business, most likely nearly all of your requirements have been marked as must-have or high priority. This stage of the game, it's very difficult to get the business to admit to a requirement that is not high priority. And we'll see a little bit further on in the webinar techniques for changing that as the process moves forward. We also expect that you have executive level sponsorship, and that you've gone through a formal selection process and you've selected your lab informatics solution or solutions. And if you haven't done all of those things, there's always CSols that you can call on. We have a wealth of experience in developing overall strategies and going through lab informatics solution selection. We also assume you've got funding, and that is something that CSols would not be able to help you with much other than building a business case. But in this example, for this webinar, we assume you have got the funding. So if you have all that in place, the question that you should be asking is, well, what could possibly go wrong. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And we're going to look at some of the areas of risk right now and identify mechanisms to mitigate that risk. So if we look at some data from 2013, we find that only 39% of IT projects are fully successful. Well, what does that mean? Number one, you've got to understand the definition of successful. What that means is they are built on time, within budget, and implement all of the documented requirements. And I'm sure that a lot of you out there that have worked on projects, it's very difficult to satisfy all of those three constraints when you're implementing a project. Scary thing is that 61% of all informatics projects fail. 18% are cancelled before completion. And the remaining 43% means they're challenged, but they eventually get there. They're either late, over budget, or delivered with less functionality than expected. Okay, so some other statistics here, all based on large sample size, but sample size, just to point out, is IT projects in general. These are not lab-specific projects. Key thing here is the larger the project, the more likely it is to fail. And conversely, the smaller the project, the more likely it is to be successful. And in fact, 76% of projects with less than 1 million in labor costs are successful. So you can already see where we're going with this. In order to mitigate risk, you do need to be able to have small project sizes. In addition, project goals that match overall corporate objectives also pushes up the success rate. So it's very critical that up front your strategic plan meshes in well, aligns with your